Hi, everyone. National Grid are at the heart of one of the largest infrastructure projects in the UK. Over the next 5 years, we're investing £40 billion to rewire England and Wales, and it comes with enormous challenges.
And we need geospatial technology to underpin all of this. Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie Zacher, and I'm the GIS Platform Manager at National Grid Electricity Transmission.
And I'm Ben Ifko. I'm our Head of Information Management, and until recently, I was our GIS lead. National Grid is an enormous company. We're in the FTSE 15, and you'll probably be most familiar with our electricity transmission department. This is our business unit which owns and operates all of the overhead lines and pylons and substations you'll see as you drive around the country. We've got other large business units as well, and one of them is electricity distribution, which enables us to take that high voltage electricity, move it down to a lower voltage, and transmit it directly into the homes of 18 million customers. And we also have National Grid Ventures, and they own and operate our interconnector fleet, which enables us to share excess energy with our European neighbours. Today's presentation is going to be focused on strategic infrastructure, which was set up 2 or 3 years ago to deliver the Great Grid Upgrade. The Great Grid Upgrade is the biggest transformation of electricity transmission in the UK in generations. It's driven by a couple of factors. Normally, our upgrades to our transmission network are driven by customer demand. Someone wants to build a leisure centre in a new area and they need to energise that asset. In this case, we're driven by government legislation. The government have set really ambitious targets for the UK, and electricity transmission are there to help to put those into place. It comes in 2 kind of drivers, really. The first one is that there's a desire to add 50 gigawatts of offshore wind to the network by 2030, and that is a huge change. This 50, did I say 50? 50 gigawatts. That 50 gigawatts represents roughly the peak energy demand of the country as things stand now, and it's a huge change because we're changing from generating electricity generally in hydrocarbon-based power stations to generating through offshore wind. But we're also changing where it's being generated, moving from generally the north of England to the North Sea. That's a big change in itself, but the plan now as well is by 2050 is we want to add about 3 to 4 times as much capacity to the network as well. So not only changing how energy is being generated, where it's being generated, but also how much we're able to transmit around the country. To put this into some kind of perspective for you, National Grid now need to deliver about 5 times as much electricity transmission infrastructure in the next 7 years as they have done in the previous 30. And this creates a huge challenge for a business like National Grid. We're one of the largest utility companies in the world, and all of a sudden, in less than a decade, we need to become one of the largest design and construction businesses. And this needs to be underpinned by high-quality digital work. Now, as Charlie said earlier, geospatial is key to driving those efficiencies that are going to enable us to deliver what we need to do for the Great Grid Upgrade. The challenge was that a year and a half ago, there was no geospatial capability centralized within National Grid. We had no standards for our geospatial data. They were in all kinds of crazy formats, as I'm sure you can all imagine. And there was no centralized way of storing those data as well. They're completely inaccessible and unfindable, locked away in hundreds of SharePoint folders, which again, I'm sure a lot of you can sympathize with. Even if we had wanted to centralize those data, there was a huge blocker that we had no GIS platform. We had no centralized place where we could put those data, store them, analyze our data, and democratize them to the rest of the business. And this was creating some significant challenges. One of them was that the Great Grid Upgrade is comprised of multiple projects, and they're all siloed from each other, and within each project there might be silos by discipline. And that was leading to strategic blind spots. How do we do better across the suite of the Great Grid Upgrade if we can't get our data speaking to each other? The other part was that, and this is on a much smaller scale, but in terms of wasteful acquisition, we're going out and procuring third-party data sets and maybe procuring them multiple times because we weren't aware that they'd already been purchased. Now, the challenge of the Great Grid Upgrade extends way beyond GIS, of course, and one of the ways that National Grid are facing that challenge is that they've set up something called the Great Grid Partnership. This is a partnership of 7 organizations, 2 of whom will be our design and consenting partners, and 5 will be our construction partners. This is a £9 billion contractual framework, which means that we can get the best talent, lock them in, and use them as a single, or act almost as a single organization with National Grid to deliver that efficiency and that innovation and that collaboration. And while this is a really powerful way to deliver really ambitious, huge infrastructure projects across the country, the challenge here is that it introduces a huge conflict with the existing ways of working within National Grid. National Grid are one of the most significant infrastructure utility businesses within the country. And if anything were to compromise the parent organisation, the lights across England and Wales would literally go off. So we have to find a way to create that innovative culture with broken down boundaries between organisations to create that collaborative decision-making based on high-quality data. And somehow we need to do it without compromising the parent organisation. Most people in the room will know the opportunity of GIS within these major infrastructure projects, but I'll talk you through an example here. Up here, we've got a map of the east of England, and I've talked a bit about some of our projects at National Grid. And what I mean by a project generally is one of two kinds. Either we're taking assets that already exist within National Grid, so overhead lines, substations, and upgrading them to prepare for this ambitious goal. Or we're going into completely greenfield sites and we're connecting up previously disconnected parts of the network. And you can see in this area, and in fact I'll zoom in on East Nottinghamshire, 4 or 5 of our projects, and you can see straight away some of the challenges of having a siloed approach. These projects interface with one another, they need to connect into a network eventually, and we need to all jostle for the same space to be able to deliver them. Now, an example of something we need to manage with these interfaces is environmental surveys. And let's take the example of the Badger. For each of these surveys, for each of these projects, we need to go and survey up to 500 meters around all of these project boundaries. And if we put a buffer on for that, you can see straight away what the challenge will be if we don't bring in a joined-up approach. We'll be sending out surveyors over and over again to the same areas and potentially incurring all of the problems that go along with that. And while badgers are a bit of a small example, when you explode that out for all of the ways that National Grid need to coordinate these projects through our designs to make sure that the projects interface and connect in correctly, from our environmental surveys, from our land agreements, health and safety, we don't want to send out people over and over again to the same site. It's not good for Grid, it's not good for the surveyors, it's not good for the bill payer, it's not good for the badgers. Stakeholder engagement is the one that's close to my heart. We're going out to these communities and we're telling them how our work either will, or we're reassuring them that the work won't impact them. And we need to do that in a concerted way, not going out project by project and talking to these communities one by one. So somehow, we need to navigate that challenge of the business to understand how do we navigate the complications of a very, very risk-averse organization and yet bring in all of that collaborative working. So when I joined Grid a year and a half ago, one of the first things I did was to author a geospatial data strategy. Interviewed lots of people, and we wrote out what is the current state of GIS within strategic infrastructure? Where do we want it to go? What's on the roadmap? What are our strategic priorities? But it all boiled down to a single vision for what we wanted to achieve. And we said we want to empower National Grid and strategic infrastructure and its partners by providing high-quality, up-to-date data and capability. So not just data, we want to give the service to the business to make it easy to use. And we then want to embed those into that collaborative decision-making process and make it as easy as possible for people to benefit from geospatial data.
And that seamless integration is underpinned by excellent technology. So here you're looking at a high-level architecture diagram for our existing platform at National Grid Electricity Transmission. In 2023, the platform was migrated over to a full enterprise ArcGIS platform, and we now have an internal system and an external system in the form of ArcGIS Online. So to deliver the Great Grid upgrade, onboard internal teams needed to be brought onto the platform to enable them to collaborate and share data, as you've heard from Ben. And we decided to use the existing Esri platform rather than set up a whole new approach within strategic infrastructure. So strategic infrastructure-specific components, dedicated ArcGIS server, image server, and partition space within our database. Currently, linking the AGOL platform with our internal platform, this is work that's underway at the moment, and we need to do this in a secure way to give teams that capability to push data as a map service one way into AGOL. And many of our partners already have their own instances of AGOL, so it made sense for us to utilize this platform. And the key message here is that we're changing the way that we work, and the technology needs to remain secure, but allow this type of collaboration. So how is this helping us? Well as avoiding months or even years of designing and rolling out a brand new GIS solution for our strategic infrastructure colleagues, we've also been able to triple our user base of the platform internally and build new applications that are driving new traffic to the platform as well. And this provides the operational justification for further investment and scaling. In a secure way, we've created more than 100 new constraints layers, and there are more to come. And the time that it takes to create and publish a map has been reduced by around 90%, and I'm sure you will agree that that's quite impressive. What we're excited about most is being able to spin up dashboards to help assess bids for £200 million contracts. And for the first time, the organisation is taking the ambitious step to enable collaboration with external partners. And this is in the most efficient way possible by integrating our internal and external GIS, but this is all happening within the risk appetite of our critical UK infrastructure business model and a security-intense landscape. So what does all this mean for the future? So like most organisations, National Grid has been using GIS for some years. In the middle there, you can see Konstantin. We visited him recently in our fantastic control centre, and he showed us how he used the GIS platform to respond to emergency calls into the control centre. Teams based in the office are using the system for land access permission, safety, customer connections, and much, much more. And field engineers are using ArcGIS field maps on tablets to locate assets and report back on maintenance issues. And at the centre of this is a comprehensive digitised data set of our network, including all of our major infrastructure, so your overhead lines, your towers, substations, underground cables, but also containing internal components of our substations. So we can start to move towards 3D BIM and digital twins, and soon implementation of utility network model. And Ben's GIS strategy combines improved data standards and a data handover protocol for our new infrastructure with this system implementation. This will set us up for improved asset management in the future. And as we obviously continue to face adverse weather conditions, increased demand on the network, and also the journey towards net zero, GIS is going to remain an essential tool for our business. So the information that Ben and the strategic infrastructure team are collecting and mapping will eventually flow down into our day-to-day operations. We're looking here at an example of how GIS is used for asset management. This is our Waltham Cross substation in North London, and teams can very quickly pull information about our sites into view. It's a very traditional, simple GIS application, but it really brings location to life in many different scenarios. So while the construction side of the business uses the platform to create our infrastructure, the operational teams rely heavily on a seamless handover of that information. And now another example. Some of you may be familiar with Hinkley. It's a massive new nuclear facility down in the West Country. This is an interactive map that my team have been developing for the public. So it supports the statutory consultation for the Hinkley Point C connection. And this digital tool makes the process transparent and easy to navigate. End users can explore the proposed infrastructure and access key information to have their say and shape the future. And we're going to have to build many of these public-facing apps for consultation and just for information for the Great Grid upgrade. So with this new system implementation project, we've built the foundations to be able to do that effectively. So let's recap on some of the challenges. In an essence, we are building the plane as we're flying it. So in moving from a traditional utilities company to include a construction space, we need digital solutions to deliver this huge grid upgrade at pace. And we had to find ways to collaborate with our external partners and also set up internal teams for sharing data. All of this, again, within the context of a very risk-averse, critical infrastructure business. And in order to lower costs and avoid technical debt, our approach should be to use the existing systems where we can. So I hope that we've given you a really good idea today of just how big this challenge is. In a nutshell, we're set to deliver one of the biggest infrastructure upgrades the UK has ever seen. and National Grid are at the heart of this, and we need geospatial technology to support that journey. Thanks for listening, and I'm going to hand over now to the Esri technical team.
Thank you very much to Charlie and Ben from National Grid. That was a fantastic and very important presentation. My name is James Gibbs, and I'm joined today by Ellaline Lusby, and we're going to be taking a look at how you can visualize your data in ArcGIS app builders. But before we do that, how long have you been in here for now? 4, 5 hours? I'll tell you what, we will take a little break from the QE2 and we'll go down to the British Museum, where you could find this, the Great Wave off Kanagawa. Now, this is one of the most reproduced images in the whole world, and no doubt you've seen it before. But sometimes you can see things afresh when you have a guide to point out some extra details. So, for instance, take a look at this dark color blue. This is called Prussian blue and was introduced to Japan during the early 1800s. And this was quite an important thing because it marked Japan opening up to the rest of the world. Secondly, this image, you might think it's all about the wave, but actually it was one of a series of images that focused on Mount Fuji down here. And finally, in the West, we read things from left to right. So we all look and we see that wave first. We look on the left-hand side. But in Japan, images such as this are read from right to left. So if I flip this image around, the first thing you actually look at is the boat, and then you see this wave crashing down towards it. So, what does all of this have to do with GIS? Well, I like to think of us GIS professionals as artists, and instead of paints, we use data, or data, as some people say, and we use that data to create a map. This is our painting, if you will. Now, if we're any good, that painting, that map is going to get shared with lots and lots of people. But what you really need is people to understand what's going on underneath, to understand the culture and the context in which it was created. And that's where we have our apps. These allow us to gain that extra understanding of the data and bring people along in the story. So, today we're going to be taking a look at 2 different app builders. We have ArcGIS Dashboards and ArcGIS Experience Builder. And to situate this all in the real world, we're going to be looking at it in the context of something called the Spatial Development Strategy. And Ellaline is going to explain a little bit more about what that is now.
Thank you very much, James. So a Spatial Development Strategy, or SDS, is a new government initiative. It sets out a high-level regional planning framework. It has been introduced and expanded through the National Planning Policy Framework. It helps coordinate growth across local multiple authorities. Local governments use these strategies to set out long-term plans, often looking at 20 to 30 years ahead for things like housing, infrastructure, economic growth, and climate resilience. These then influence the direction of these local plans. So I'll have a look at what data we'll be using today to really bring out what we want to show our users in a spatial development strategy. We have chosen to look into the housing and demand supply within the UK, but more specifically within the proposed Thames Valley area. The first 2 datasets we have used for this is open data from the Living Atlas, which is Esri's authoritative data repository. We have the most up-to-date census data from the Office of National Statistics in 2021. This data has many attributes, but the most relevant being population over time and the occupancy rating for bedrooms, which gives an indication into overcrowding within an area. We have also added the index of multiple deprivation for England in 2025. Our next 2 datasets are premium data. So first we have data from the Ordnance Survey from their National Geographical Database. We'll be looking into their buildings layer, which gives us an indication of houses built before the year 2000 and houses built after the year 2000. Lastly, we have data from one of our partners, LandClan. We'll be looking at flood and environmental constraints. So now I've outlined what data we'll be using, I now need to map this. So I'll be using ArcGIS online map viewer. So we have our data at two different geographies. The first being the lower super output area, which is a bit more granular, and we can look into our data and our area in a bit more detail. I've got a larger geography, which is our lower tier local authority, which is a bit more generalized, and we can get a better overview of the housing demand and supply. So now I've mapped my data, I now need to make this more understandable for my users. So I'll be using ArcGIS dashboards to help my users understand the story I'm trying to put across. So the map I have created using the census and housing data is the artwork, and the dashboards are what will help us truly explore and understand them. Dashboards are a fantastic way to visualize maps because they bring key data together on a clear, easy-to-read screen. You can visualize key indicators, as seen on the screen here, which help bring out the data and what's truly relevant to the area of the map that you're looking at. They dynamically update to give you the most relevant data that you're looking at. They're quick to build, ready to use straight out of the box, and require no coding, which means they're very accessible to any level of GIS user. With flexible design and layout options, dashboards are great for filtering and tracking key variables. So let's have a look at a dashboard together. So this is my dashboard of the more generalized geography of the lower tier local authority. So I've already added a few elements here on how to use this dashboard and a legend, but it's quite easy where you go over to the top right-hand side and select a local authority from the drop-down. So in this demonstration, I'll just click on Slough. As you can see, my dashboard has panned and zoomed to the area I have selected. You may have also noticed that the elements around my map have also updated to give me the most relevant information for the place I'm looking at. So you can see at the bottom right, I have a details panel, which gives you more information at the data, which you may not have spotted from looking at the map alone. On the left-hand side, I have added two charts. So I have the population growth over time from 1991 to 2021. I also have housing growth over the same time span from 91 all the way over to 2021. I've also added an indicator in the top left-hand side showing the number of houses built in Slough since 2000. But that's looking at Slough at a more generalized perspective. So if I want to take a bit closer look at the housing demand and supply within this area, I can switch over to my more more granular geography, which is the lower tier local authority. So this dashboard works in the same way, where if I click on the category selector in the top right-hand corner and click on Slough, my dashboard then pans and zooms exactly where I wanted it to go. My indicators have also dynamically updated, giving me a percentage increase in housing from before 2000 to post-2000. I've also added in my index of multiple deprivation decile in the bottom left-hand corner. These indicators work a bit differently from my previous dashboard. So these ones work as I pan and zoom the map. They then update and give an average score based on the area I'm looking at in my map extent. And as you can see from my dashboard, Slough appears to be suffering quite a lot from housing demand and supply. So how did I put this dashboard together? Well, first, let's go back a step to the map viewer. So you can see both of my data sets are in the layers option on the left-hand side. And although this hasn't really got much more information to it, it's trying to tell us something, but I'd like to draw that out for my users. So if I go to the left-hand side and click Create App, you then got loads of options of web applications which are available for you to use. So obviously today I'd like to explore dashboards. So when I click on that button, I'm taken to the dashboard wizard. And my map is automatically added in there for me. So when I go to the plus button, I can then start adding those elements. So if I hit plus, I'm listed with a bunch of elements that I have available. So if I hit map legend, it automatically adds a legend that's relevant to the data that I have in my map viewer. I can hit done as I'm happy with what it's presented to me. But I'd like to add a few of those more dynamic elements that I had in my previous dashboard, where it pans and updates depending on where I am in my map. So when I click plus, I can go to my details element and hit sensors. And that's giving me a bit more information about the data I'm looking at. When I hit done, I can then drag across, making my dashboard a bit more map-centric. As you can see, my details pane is giving me 1 of 13, which is kind of all of the area I'm looking at, but I'd like to make it a bit more interactive and have it update based on the map extent. So if I go to the little cog of the settings of the map and hit map actions, I can filter on my details widget so that as the map extent changes, my details will also dynamically update. So if I show that in action, I zoom into Oxford here, you can see that it's only giving me the Oxford information. So lastly, I just wanted to highlight that we have a few dynamic themes that you can choose from when creating dashboards. So if I click just on one of these, you can see my dashboard is automatically brought a bit more to life and made a bit more interesting. But you have this Customize Selected Theme button at the bottom here where you can create colors and create a theme that suits your business needs. And lastly, I just wanted to point out that you can also add some arcade to your dashboards to really step up that configuration. But for now, I'll pass back to James, who will be talking us through Experience Builder.
Thank you very much, Adeline. Can we just stop there for 1 second and just consider that workflow that we've done? Because we all work with data here, right? And we're all producing maps. And you just saw that, how Adeline could really quickly build out this dashboard that starts to incorporate all of these widgets, and it gives us an understanding of what is going on with the data. And we've started to see in Slough this area of higher housing demand compared to the rest of the region. Now, that's a really interesting story, but we want to be able to share that story with people who are from beyond this room, members of the general public, different stakeholders. And that's where Experience Builders come in. So, ArcGIS Experience Builder expands on top of dashboards. It allows us to have multiple pages, giving it the look and feel of a website. Just like with Adeline's dashboard, you can drag and drop in widgets, but you have a much wider variety of different things that you can add to your Experience Builder. All of this comes together to give the user a deeper level of understanding and a deeper ability to explore the data. And the really nice thing we can do is we can start to bring people into that story. And I'll show you that a little bit later on. But first, let's see how we could take those same data sets and start to put them into Experience Builder to tell this story about housing demand in our area of interest. So, here is our Experience Builder, and you can see it looks very much like a website. I've got a list of links up here at the top where I can see different aspects of our spatial development strategy. We have all of these different pieces coming together, bits of text, titles, and images, but don't worry, there is a map coming, and here it is. So, this is just like Adeline's dashboard before. We can click on an area that we're interested in, let's say Slough, and we get zoomed in on the map, and you'll notice up here in the top right, this dynamic piece of text is also updated. And it tells us that, look, the population in Slough has increased by 50%, and the number of households has increased by 30% in the same period. So, yeah, this is an area where there is more housing demand compared to the rest of our spatial development strategy. But we can keep going with this website, and we can scroll down further, and now we have that more granular view, and actually we've selected an area here. So these dark blue areas are regions of high housing demand, as provided by the Office for National Statistics in that Living Atlas dataset. And we can start to see different pieces of demographic information. So here we have some demographic information for that selected area from the Index of Multiple Deprivation. We can also click onto this tab, and we can see the different occupancy ratings of households in that region, as well as a breakdown of the age groups. Now, this is really useful because we're starting to look at this area, we're starting to understand who's living there. But of course, that's not the whole story when it comes to housing. There are other things we need to consider. So, if I continue down further, you'll see I have that exact same map, but on the right-hand side, I have a 3D scene. And this is using Google's photorealistic tiles. Because it's really important that you can actually look at the area and understand what's really going on there. It's all well and good seeing it on a 2D map, but sometimes when you can see things in reality, it makes a big difference. So let's zoom into Slough, and you'll see that we've got that region of dark blue. So this is where we have that higher level of housing demand. And you might notice, actually, over here on my scene, I have an industrial site here. Now, perhaps this could be a good area to start looking at building new houses. We already know there's a lot of demand in that area. But what we can now do is use this little slider tool to start to see other data sets. And here we have a light blue data set, and that is provided by our partners at LandClan, and that's showing us areas of potential flood risk. We also have these green areas, and that shows us areas of the green belt. So now we can start to think about housing demand in context of other variables too. But so far, we've just talked at the members of the public who are interested in our spatial development strategy. And what we want to do is we want to get them involved and hear what they have to say. So I'll show you the back end of Experience Builder now, and I'll explain a little bit how some of these widgets work and how we can start to bring people along with us. So now we're in the back end of Experience Builder, very much like a dashboard. You've got the app here right in the center. On the left-hand side, you can navigate to different pages, and on the right-hand side, you can customize your widgets. So let's scroll all the way down, and we're going to go and take a look at that final map that I showed you, where you've got the linked map and scene. Now, the way that I did that was I selected the map, and you'll see it updates here on the right-hand side. And I can then configure the map using this Action tab. And all I had to do was add what we call a trigger. And all that does is when the extent on this map on the left-hand side changes, I can apply these actions so that we zoom to and pan to that same location in the 3D scene. And that's how, quite quickly with Experience Builder, you can start to build these really advanced interactions. But as promised, let's get people involved. So I'm going to come to this page down here called Get Involved, and I can select it, and you see that's now updated in my view. So then I can just add in a new widget so that we can start hearing what people have to say about our spatial development strategy. So if I come up here to the top left, and if my screen allows me to do that, there we go. I can click this plus icon, and you'll see that I have loads of different widgets. Now, we don't have time to go through all of them, but broadly speaking, there are map-centric widgets. So this is how I can add in my map or my 3D scene. We also have the ability here to add in things like the swipe tool, and that can just allow you to look at 2 different data sets. We also have the ability to analyze our data within Experience Builder, which is kind of amazing, right? Okay, then we have other widgets. We have data-centric widgets, which show us our attribute information, and that can be updated dynamically when we're selecting areas. And then you have all of the things that you would want when you're building out effectively a website. You've got rows, columns, you've got pieces of text that you can drag and drop in, and images. But what I want is I want to have a survey. So if I search for survey, I can then just drag and drop that into my experience and expand it out. Then I'm going to select my own survey. So I'm going to choose a survey that I've already created in Survey 123. I'll insert that, and I'm going to enable the survey's theme, which I've set so that it matches in nicely with my website. And so now I could save this Experience Builder, publish it, and then that's going to allow members of the public to start to be able to provide their feedback on our spatial development strategy. We can then see those comments, and we can use that to really start to build out that strategy so that it best serves the people in that area. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a recap of where we've been. We started out with all of those different data sets, and created a map. And then we've used that to create our web apps, and this has allowed us to understand the data. Our ArcGIS dashboard gave us that initial insight very quickly that we've got this area of housing demand in Slough, and then Experience Builder allowed us to tell that story and bring other people along with us. So, in summary, the differences between them: dashboards, they are very quick to configure, they're no code, and you saw how Ella was able to set that up in just a few minutes. Experience Builder takes a little bit more time, but you have the ability to have all of these advanced interactions and allow people to come and get involved with the projects that you're working on. So, thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and thank you once again to National Grid, to Ben and Charlie for that fantastic presentation before. Back to you, Georgina.